All right, Wolf,
Hey, how's it going?
we are ready. We're ready to talk about shared inbox strategies, and I'm excited. I love this topic.
Yeah, I think when you look at property management and all the things that we can and can't do and shouldn't do, we really manage communication. That's really like one of our anchor core, or should be one of our anchor core competencies. So, setting up for success and having the right tools will definitely help with that.
Yes.
And we have record-breaking registrations for this episode, so that's really exciting as well.
Yes, I think we had around 350 registrants for this episode, which is, yeah, record breaker. And so a lot of you are interested in learning about shared inbox strategies too. So we're going to be going into a deep dive on what is a shared inbox, why do you need one, how do you set one up, how do you use it, what are some things to look out for. We're going to spend the whole hour plus going really deep on this topic. So we're going to give maybe another minute. I see folks are still coming in, and then we're going to kick off.
Yeah. And if you're coming in and you already have like questions that you feel you need to have answered in order for this webinar to be a 10 for you, go ahead and drop them in the Q&A session. That way, as we are talking, we can, be cognizant of those questions and try to weave them into our responses or even just pause and just answer them directly. So if you're already coming with maybe pain points or you've started shared inbox and you're already like, what the heck, I need help with this specific thing, drop it in the Q&A so we can have that loaded up.
Yeah, and if you submitted a question when you registered for the webinar, we have those. I have those off to the side here. I can't promise we're going to get to all of those, but you don't have to repeat them in the actual Q&A box.
Yeah, apparently our first question is about our hair care, and we have nice hairdos. Thank you, Clay. Appreciate that.
I just got a haircut yesterday, actually. So yeah, making me feel good, Clay.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get going. So first, I want to really thank LeadSimple for hosting and sponsoring this webinar. Peter and the Wolf, we're in season 2 here. They've been great partners and sponsors of this show that we do together. We have a lot of fun with it. I know they have a lot of fun with it too. They're doing all the back end work, handling all the registration, putting together all the graphics, hosting the actual webinar, and paying for the LeadSimple or the you know Zoom, whatever fancy account you have to host a big webinar with over 100. Looks like we're well over 100 live participants today. So big shout out to them. Obviously, if you don't know, Wolf and I are users of the product and big fans. So thanks again to them. So Wolf, how do we want to start? What's our way into this topic today?
Well, I think the first way to look at this is actually how can we reduce the number of emails we're getting before we even get into shared inbox? Let's just reduce the number of emails. And I see you like
Look
my
at
chat
this guy. It's
GPT
making me
email
laugh.
here.
This graphic.
So, the as your email address gets out there more, whether it's your individual or a company one like an info ad or whatever, especially the company ones, because it's going to be like on your website, it's getting scraped and people are selling that information and you're increasingly get more and more spam. So setting up a policy on how do we unsubscribe and just unsubscribe from everything and anything from a shared address if you're doing like an info ad or whatever. If you're sign up for Peter's newsletter on your personal one, don't unsubscribe for that one. Keep it. But from these shared inboxes, I personally don't think that they need to be subscribed to a lot of these services. So setting up a policy around unsubscribing, who's going to do it, how they're going to do it, are they going to do it in batch as they come in, whatever it may be, whatever you're comfortable with, get that set up and just start unsubscribing from all the nonsense. The
Yeah.
second one,
So
oh, go
this,
ahead.
just to pause, this reminds me of a great maxim, which is like, don't automate something if you can just eliminate it, right? This is the same idea. It's like, don't put together a system for dealing with a high volume of email before you take steps just to reduce the volume of email in the
Mhm.
first place. That's going to give you way more. That's a higher leverage point from which to engage with the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just, yeah, you don't want to automate a turd. Second one, it we kind of live in Groundhog's Day, right? The movie where every day's the same. So we know the first week of the month usually has this flow, second of the week. Each month kind of repeats. Most of our move-ins are, for the most part, the same, and people ask the same questions. So as you're building your workflows, you kind of already know probably what a tenant or an owner may be anticipating in the form of questions at certain points of their journey, whether they're a new owner, new tenant, their first statement, all those common areas. Anticipate that they're probably going to want some information. You already know what the top 10 questions are. So give it to them ahead of time, not too early, but right around the time where they're probably thinking about it. And a great example for this is if you've ever flown Delta Airlines, they do, I think, a phenomenal job anticipating probably what's going around in your brain at certain points leading up to you getting on the plane and taking off.
You think we could get them as a sponsor, Wolf?
I think we should. Their first class is pretty phenomenal, so I think we should do it. But they know, a couple days before you're probably starting to think about, okay, I need to pack. What should I pack? Which airport, security. And so they're sending you different things at those crucial times. And it saves me the time from having to go to the website or even calling or chatting or emailing. They anticipated. So we should be able to do the same thing because, and Peter's heard me say it a lot, if your owners or clients have to contact you, you failed. So anticipate and get that information out ahead of time.
Yeah, so that's the extreme position that helps
Mm-hmm.
you rethink everything that you're doing. And Wolf, yes, you said that. I forget if it was just in conversation or on a webinar together. That was over a year ago. I've never forgotten it. So just this is like I said in the chat, take time to map out your customer journey and think about what are they going to be wondering about at this point, during the process, whether that's a resident or a property owner, and proactively rather than reactively provide that information.
Mm-hmm. And it's, doesn't necessarily have to be text, email. It could be sending out a Loom video or it could be a phone call, but by anticipating, you're able to prevent them sending one more email that's going to go into the shared inbox, which then could turn into multiple emails back and forth. So it's definitely, as you're building out your workflows, kind of looking at what are certain points where somebody might want information, let's get it to them. And then the last one is actually stop using email. I shouldn't say stop using it, but looking at how we communicate with our owners' intents and maybe realizing that a text-based email is not the best way and that it actually creates more emails. I just had an example of this last week. Had an owner at the beginning of April, new owner, ask some questions about their statement. I'm sure that's never happened to you, but we're at Folio, so they had some questions. And rather than just typing out a response, I knew that my response would probably then create more questions. And then we would go back and forth.
Correct.
They're out of country, and it would just create more work. Well, what I did is I recorded a Loom video, pulled up their actual statement, talked about and addressed their initial answer, but then I talked about some other items and then showed in their portal where they can get more information, more reports, etc. Sent it to them. They didn't respond until last week. So over a month, they responded and said, thank you so much for this video. This is great. And don't share that to brag, but just to share that especially if you have owners where English isn't their primary language and they have questions, send them a Loom video or get on the phone. A phone call, a 2-minute phone call could probably save sometimes, 5 or 6 emails back and forth and all that delay between emails.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Wolf. And I've noticed for years that every time you send an email, you're just inviting a reply. Like there's something about that form of written communication and how easy it is to just hit reply, and there's almost an expectation of a reply.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get an email from a resident or a property owner, more often than not, a phone call is a great way to resolve it, especially if it's even slightly contentious. Like if they're just asking like, "Hey, what's the date of my lease renewal?" or "Hey, just can you send me the contract for blah blah blah?" Like, yes, obviously email them that stuff, but if they have a question about something that's going to get involved or that's contentious in any way, get on the phone with them It's honestly the quickest and easiest way to resolve it. It makes you look like a professional. It makes you look like you care. If you just reply with an email, now they're going to reply back, and it's going to go back and forth and back and forth. But if they email, then you call. There's no like next step for them
Hmm.
sitting in their inbox the way there is if you reply with an email, even if you say the exact same thing. So
Yeah, I agree. Especially like for us, we found when it's dealing with work orders, turns, those bigger projects, the email may specifically ask, "Hey, what brand toilet are you putting in?" You respond, and then they come back, "Well, are you putting in a new wax ring?" And then you respond, and you just play this game back and forth. We're on a phone call, let them unload all their questions, and you're done.
yeah.
And I've yet to have phone calls that consistently are going over maybe 10 minutes. Obviously, you have some, but the bulk of them you can get done in 5 to 10 minutes, and you're great.
Yep. All right. What's next, Wolf?
So, what the heck is a shared inbox? Like, what's the difference between a shared inbox and my normal inbox? Like, should I have multiple shared inboxes? Who am I sharing it with? But like, just what are those basics of what is a shared inbox?
Yeah. So here's how I think about this. So everyone, of course, is familiar with your normal email and what I'm going to call your personal inbox. Now, I don't mean like your personal Gmail for home stuff. When I say personal inbox in the context of this webinar, I'm talking about like like for me, it's peter at rlpmg.com. That's my
Hmm.
personal email
Hmm.
account. So everyone has one of those, obviously. What we mean by shared inbox is an inbox that's used by multiple people at your company. So, for example, a common one would be info at abccompany.com or support at leadsimple.com or, etc. So that's a shared inbox. And the idea behind a shared inbox is multiple people at your company have access to it. Could be just two people, but it could be as many as 10 or 20 people that are inside that account, and it's set up specifically to handle a function within your business. And I say specific, and by that I mean external communications. I really want to get clear here on the difference between internal communications and external communications because I think it's critical to using a shared inbox. Internal communications is among team members. So if I'm emailing my COO, that's internal communications. If our administrative assistant is sending out a memo to all the team members about we're closed on Fridays, that's internal communications. External communications is outside your company. That's dealing with residents, property owners, vendors, and anyone else, the general public, prospective tenants, potential clients, everyone like that. And shared inboxes are a fantastic strategy for handling external email communications. So you can set up, and we're going to talk about different strategies and how we've implemented it, but you can set up a single shared inbox that you use for all external communications, or you can set up multiple shared inboxes for either different departments or different pods or squads at your company. There's a few different ways you can break this down, and we're going to get into detail on that.
Yeah, and it's the benefit to the shared inbox, you know, you don't have to worry about the whole, well, sorry, they're on vacation. You have to wait till they get back because they don't have access to their inbox. I think people recognize that. But then there's also the simplicity to the public. They don't have to remember all different types of email addresses. They just need maybe one or two, depending on how you're structured. Personally, our company, we just have one email address. It's info at, and it makes it very easy for our owners or tenants or vendors to just, there's just one email address and they don't have to worry about, well, is this, this type of email or that. It just makes it easy. As companies grow, things change a little bit. I definitely believe in having one inbox per team or pod. If you're structured that way, I think that's a great way to speed things up. And we'll talk about how technology can help with shared inboxes, but some of the limitations with that later on. So I saw, let me see, I thought I saw a question that goes around this. Um, the one that, Catherine, what is the best practice when using shared inbox and you have a Google group email? Do you recommend setting an entirely new email address or forward all the emails on your way? So companies that are thinking about shared inbox and they've kind of been, we'll just say hacking together. I know that may have a negative feeling to it, but they've kind of put something together and now they want to get more streamlined. Should they start with a new email address? Should they forward? What's been your experience?
Yeah, great point of distinction here. There's a few actual different ways you can set this up, and there's only one like golden path or recommended solution in my mind. The different options are, yeah, there's like a group thing I think what you can do with Google. The other thing you can do is like an alias. So you can set up an alias with your email. So like if like my email, peter@rlpmg.com, I could set up an alias, pete@rlpmg.com. So if someone accidentally types that, it'll still go to me. Well, you could set up an alias like info@rlpmg.com, and then all those emails would just come to me, but that's not a true email account. In order to use a shared inbox strategy successfully, you really want to set up a true, new, unique Google account, basically, or whatever your provider is. It doesn't need
A
to be
new
Google.
user, basically.
A new user with a
Mhm.
new, brand new email, or like commandeer one of your existing users if you already have one. If you've already set up a user account for info@yourcompany.com, then you can use that one. But the idea here is you need an actual real account in order to really make this work in the way you want to, especially if you're going to sync it up with some of the solution providers we're going to talk about later that are designed to work with shared inboxes.
Yeah, and each solution provider kind of has their own little nuances in regards to do I work with a Google group email versus its own account, et cetera. So you'll want to know that ahead of time. But by far, a universal standard is creating an actual new user account with that email address, and you'll be I hate using the word 100% compatible, but 99.999% sure that your setup will work with almost any and all shared inbox. Another term for shared inbox would be a ticketing system. Sometimes that term is used. It's all kind of the same concept, but it leads kind of into the next point of, it's not just, okay, set up this new account and we're off to the races. It's actually something that you need to put some thought to. And what are your policies around a shared inbox? Because if you just set up the account, tell everybody, hey, this is where you go, jump on in, have some fun, it's going to be a disaster. It's actually going to create a lot more problems that you didn't even anticipate. So before you get set up, talk about policy, set it up as a company. These questions right here will kind of run through or kind of how you get started with this. The first one is who's going to play quarterback? Because I don't care what provider, I don't care what you use Zapier and you've built all kinds of automations. As of right now, today, May 9th, the human eye and brain is still by far the most consistent way of determining what is the email about and who should take care of it, and setting up some type of way to be a quarterback, whether it's one for the whole company, maybe one person per team or per department, but having that human intervention. Because why that's important, you're going to send an email to an owner. You're going to talk about a roof repair, subject line, roof repair, 123 Main Street. You're going to go back and forth. 10 months go by. And for whatever reason, that owner is not going to create a new email. They're going to go back to the roof repair 123 email and then ask you about their January statement.
So true.
And the automation is going to say, oh, subject line mentions roof repair. That's the maintenance department. And maintenance is going to get it. No, this isn't about me. This should go to accounting or whatever. And so now you have this delay. So really think about the concept of like a communication quarterback will really help. The other one is how often are you going to check your emails in the shared inbox? Is it once a day? Is it every hour? Who's going to be checking? What's the frequency? Setting up an SLA, a service level agreement. And this is a really great thing for those companies that want to offer guarantees. A lot of the guarantees in our industry, quite frankly, are fluff. This is actually a guarantee that owners will be excited about. We guarantee that we respond to communications within 12 business hours. If not, we'll give you a statement credit. Like that's what owners care about. If you've ever taken over a new management agreement from a previous company, I'd venture to say the majority of the time they're leaving because of communication or lack of communication. So having a guarantee that we respond to communication within X amount of business hours, that is huge. People will love it. But you got to have policies around that. What does it mean to clear out the inbox? Do we just go in and cherry pick the emails that we want and leave everything else? Or if you go into the inbox, You got to sign everything. Those are some questions to think about. How often do we clear it out? What does it mean to clear out the inbox? But having policies around that so there's no misunderstanding. And then here's the real one. An email actually represents work, a request for something to be done. So how do we convert this? John asked a question about most email providers like MS365 offer shared inboxes. How does this differ from what LeadSimple is offering? And I'll be the first to admit that the LeadSimple inbox is great. Yes, there are some areas for improvement, and those are being worked on. But what has really attracted me, I left Help Scout. Help Scout is probably the Cadillac for shared inboxes. It's an awesome product. But why I left Help Scout without any hesitation is I can simply within LeadSimple inbox, an email comes in, I can quickly turn that into a process, and it's already connected with my property management data. So now the person playing quarterback in our company, they are allowed to start any process because of how we structured our processes. So now the email comes in saying, hey, I was in town. I drove by 123 Main Street and that lawn was crazy tall. You need to do something about it. Instantly, we can turn that into a lease violation process and we're good.
Yeah, so good.
That's huge power right there. And where if you were in a different tool, you then got to have that tool open and then jump to your workflow management software or however you're going to deal with it or your property management software. And so each time you change windows, inefficiency creeps in. So for me, the benefit with LeadSimple Inbox is that I can right from that message start a process, create the lead, whatever I need to do, and I don't have to leave anywhere, and it's synced with my property management software.
Yeah, so I love this slide. This is really gold, and regardless of whether you're using LeadSimple or Help Scout or any other software, this is all relevant, right? And going back years, we were using shared inboxes long before we were using LeadSimple or anything else. You would just have multiple people logging into that Gmail account, right? And all of these things are super important, even in that context. Who's in charge of this account, right? If I log in and there's messages from 2 weeks ago sitting unread in the inbox, um, there's a great quote I like to throw around. I need one throat to choke. Who's responsible for this, right? And that's the quarterback that you're referencing.
Yeah.
You can, because otherwise it's that Spider-Man meme where everyone's just pointing at each other. It's like, no, that you gotta. That doesn't mean one person does all the work and handles all the emails, but one person needs to be accountable for the overall completion.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So if you're not already convinced, I want to throw in just a couple more reasons that a shared inbox is important. For one thing, if you have everyone operating out of their personal inbox accounts, if that person leaves or dies or gets fired or even is on vacation, all of that communication is locked up inside their account, and you have no idea what's going on. You don't know what communication has taken place between that employee and the resident or the owner. You don't know what promises they were making. You can't see anything. And so, and actually, even if they're still at the company, you don't have visibility over that. You don't know how quickly they're responding to things. You don't know what type of language they're using in their replies. And so you just have no visibility on one of the most important parts of your management company, which is external comms, external communication. You need to have visibility into that as a manager or as a business owner. The other thing that comes up a lot, I remember before we were using shared inboxes, is there's just no context on anything. Every time an issue comes up, you're like, I don't know what we said or what was agreed to, and you're running around and you're slacking people and you're interrupting their day to ask, well, what did you tell them and what did we say about this? Because all of that communication is locked up in everybody's individual inboxes, and that's very inefficient. It's going to lead to all kinds of misses for your stakeholders, for your residents
Mhm.
and your property owners. So those are just some more reasons that I think a shared inbox is really important that we haven't touched on, and it starts to become more and more important as the company grows.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last one you kind of reference around canned responses, setting up the policy around who's creating them, who manages them, who's able to use them. I know a lot of times, I've heard people talk about remote team members and not feeling confident in their responses. I think that's kind of a crutch, but having canned responses is a great way to help with that, but also just to speed things up, right? If we can anticipate what owners or tenants may be asking at certain points, we also know that we probably answer the same 10 questions our whole career with some really cool canned responses and use those to speed up. And also part of that policy is let's revamp those canned responses occasionally because after a while they get kind of stale.
Yeah, that's right.
Add emojis, add whatever, but change them up, make it fresh. Because could you imagine an owner that owns, let's say, 30 doors and they're getting your same responses for every property for, let's say, 5 years? Eventually, they're just going to say, I'm not even going to read it anymore. So make them fresh, update them. And what's your policy on how frequently we do that?
Yeah. So I say it almost every webinar. It's one of my favorite quotes of all time. Process is downstream of policy. Credit
Yeah.
to Jordan Muela. And here we are talking about policy. And that's why, because you can't set up a great process for handling external communications or handling a shared inbox strategy if you don't have good policies.
Yeah.
Processes simply encode the policies. Processes encode the policies. So create some policies. Consider posting those on your Notion company wiki. And then you can actually implement those into technology.
Right. And a lot of the questions coming into the Q&A period are actually around policy. And, Peter and I are sharing our opinions on policy. And I think some of them are definitely should be made industry wide. But at the end of the day, it's your company. You get to set your policy. Like there was one question about, I think Alberto was asking about HOA emails. HOA, I think, is definitely unique. I personally would probably create one email address for each HOA. It would be its own shared inbox since each HOA is its own self-contained unit. It makes it real easy for the owners and whomever is dealing with that HOA to just have, info at goldenoaksassociation.com or, whatever it may be, I think is how I would tackle that. But again, that's a company policy. Do whatever works best.
Yeah. And you can experiment, right? If you have a central place where you're recording or you're documenting your company policies, it becomes a lot more straightforward to roll out a new policy and then try it out for 60 or 90 days. And if it doesn't work, roll it back and make a big announcement. Hey, we tried this new policy. It didn't work. Here's what we found. Here's what didn't work. Here's what we're going to keep about it. And here's the new policy. The company wiki's been updated with the new policy. Here's the link. Please use this moving forward, right? This is the signs of a healthy business is you're trying stuff. Not all of it's going to work, but you own up to your mistakes. You let everyone know, and then you make changes and you move on. So
Yeah, and that's a great segue actually into kind of take a break here. Our next webinar in June is going to be talking about AI, and if the thought of writing a policy document kind of makes you cringe, you're like, I'm not really good. One of the things we'll be sharing is how you can use AI to help you write a nice policy document based off of, your policy, but to make it look pretty on paper and make it formal and all of that, how AI can help you amongst a lot of other things. So that's June 13th. It will just be me because Peter's going to be on his month-long break. So we will, it'll be me and maybe I'll have AI. I'll figure out how to have AI on the webinar. That'd be kind of cool. But June 13th, the next episode of Peter and Wolf will be giving an update on AI and property management. And if you were able to hear my presentation at Broker Owner, I promise it's going to be different, but it's going to be on the same thread about actually some AI that can help you make more money, have more time, and actually move the needle, not just fluff and cool stuff. So that's
yeah.
13th.
So Amy just dropped the link in the chat. If you're enjoying this webinar, you're probably going to like this one, despite the fact that I'm not going to be there, or maybe you'll like it better since I'm not going to be there. So go ahead and register. And we can't make any promises on the AI version of me attending, but we'll see what we can do.
We'll give it a shot. We'll give it a shot. All right. So we've talked about how to just reduce email load in general. What is a shared inbox? How it can benefit you? And really spend a good amount of time on policy and the importance of setting up policies. So, but let's build an inbox. How do we build this? What tools do we use? How do we have our set up? I know, Peter, you got a nice graphic showing your layout of, because you have more than one shared inbox. So let's actually jump over. Do you have your graphic queued up?
No.
You
Should
okay?
I? I can.
Well, yeah. I'll go ahead and talk about tags and folders while you get yours queued up.
All right, I got it ready. You gotta unshare yours.
All right. So
I love that the AI image is a sandbox. Do we think that you mistyped inbox and typed sandbox?
no, I told it a sandbox on purpose. I should share my prompts on what I use for each of those pictures. I think they're pretty funny.
So do you want me to talk about my structure here?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, so these are our shared inboxes, and some of these have been around for forever, and some of them are relatively newer. We are set up as a departmental organizational structure. You may be operating as a portfolio structure or as a squad or pod structure, and I'll talk about in a second some of my thoughts on how to organize things in that case. And I also, just as a general recommendation, fewer is better here. I actually, now that I'm kind of looking at this and I had my team put this together for me, this I almost feel like is one or two too many shared inboxes. But it's working for us, and I'm always hesitant to rock the boat on something that's working. So I'm not going to read the whole slide. You can obviously see what we've got going on here. But the idea is that these are set up somewhat to match the departmental structure of our business. You can see that we have one for turns, we have one for leasing, we have a general one, we have one for communicating with owners. And moving and migrating to a shared inbox structure, the way you see it here, has been a journey. And it actually, if you've been operating out of your personal inboxes for a long time, and especially if your team has been, you're going to get resistance if you start to move toward a shared inbox structure, because it's going to start to feel very uncomfortable for you and your team to start communicating out of the shared inboxes when for so long, and perhaps for years, you've been communicating with owners and residents out of your personal inbox. And that's the one that they know to email you and they know to expect to hear from you there. So the strategy on how to do this is you got to pitch the benefits to your whole team on why it's important to use a shared inbox. And the main one I like to really hammer on is, well, when you're on vacation, you like vacation, right? Well, when you're on vacation, a shared inbox is going to allow us to keep up with everything that's going on so that when you get back from vacation, you are not facing 50 unread emails from property owners, because we need to make sure those are all taken care of while you're on vacation. And you don't need to be checking your email and forwarding emails when you're on vacation, because all of the external comms is taking place in the shared inbox. You kind of paint that vision for them, that future. Some of them are not even going to believe it's possible. I experienced this at my own company. They've been doing it this way. It's working. Why are we changing this? They're just going to keep emailing me at my personal email. No one else knows how to handle these owners or these residents, and you got to push through all that carefully, tactfully. And when you do make the change, when you start sending from the shared inbox to your residents and to your owners, you'll be amazed at how quickly they start using that new email address. And so the strategy is, anytime you get an email, and you tell your whole team this, whenever you get an email to your personal email, do not reply from that email, forward it to the shared inbox, and then reply out of that shared inbox. That's the fastest way to migrate your external stakeholders onto your new system. So that's my 2 cents on sort of the change management side of a shared inbox. And then finally, on if you have a pod or a squad structure, I think it makes complete sense to have an email address for each pod or squad, a shared inbox for each one. And then the 2 or 3 or 4 team members who are part of that squad or pod will all operate out of that shared inbox. And then you'll want management to have access to that as well, just so they can check, for reporting purposes and all that. If you have a portfolio style setup, I'm a little bit less clear on the best shared inbox strategy in that scenario. So if anyone has good ideas, maybe you can share, or Wolf, you can chat if you do, And that's what I have to say about our structure.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought up. You're just like, oh, maybe this is a little too many. So for us, maybe we're on the extreme side. We literally only have one email address, and you talked about team being kind of hesitant about using this. I ripped that Band-Aid off. I said, you know what, this is what we're gonna do. Nobody has email anymore, and we're just going to this info at. It's all gonna go in there, and life's gonna be great. And mechanically, it actually worked out really well. But psychologically, what I did not anticipate is how much people tied their identities to having an email address. And basically, what surfaced was it felt like dad took away their freedom when I took away everybody's email address. So people, I see the comments, well, what do you mean they don't have an email address? So we are a Google based company, domain, whatever you call it. So yes, they technically all have an email address because that's used for single sign on and a lot of different things. But each of their emails is set up. Any email coming in forwards right to the info at. So you know what that does? That cuts down personal use of email down to zero. Um, for HR purposes and
Okay, Wolf, wait.
payroll.
I don't know if you've fully set the stage on how extreme your position is. So first off, you only have one shared inbox, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and I think that's fine. I actually think, going back, I might just a lot of it depends on the software that you're using to manage the shared inbox and how
Mhm.
you can set that up, but I don't mind at all a company having a single shared inbox, info at rlpmg.com or support, or whatever it is. I think that's cool. I mean, I like that from a customer service perspective because there's only one email that they need to know about and contact. So that's cool. I'm on board for that, but I don't think you've fully clarified the other sort of extreme position that you've taken here, which is that you either did or do ban your team members from using their personal email accounts whatsoever.
Yeah.
So I want to clarify with my setup and with most shared inbox setups, the shared inboxes are used for external comms
Mhm.
and the personal, like Peter at rlpmg.com, remains and is used for internal comms, company memos, other like using for logins for Appfolio and Buildium and Property Meld and all that. Like you kind of need that and continue to use it for other work related stuff that isn't customer facing. But
Right.
your position was or is that you don't want your employees using those at all.
Correct. And so here's my logic for what it's worth. We had already, Wolf at, Nancy at, Eva at, everybody had theirs. And so those were out there and people were using them. And we talked about, well, how do you transition to get people to use your shared inbox? So we did the whole, it comes into your personal, then respond to the group. But I was finding that that's a little bit too much friction. So human nature says, well, it's already here. Let me just respond. And so we had fragmented conversations where half of it was in the shared inbox, half of it was in the personal, and it just wasn't, that transition wasn't clean. So I said, well, I know how to fix that. And so all those emails, they just go to our info at, and it's automatic. So there are still some people that will, email, Nancy at, or whatever. It's now just automatically going to go into the shared inbox, and that makes it real easy. We know all the information is in there. Anybody can get into a conversation and kind of get the gist of what's going on. So it
So
was
we
that transition piece.
Yeah. So, side note, we've got some LeadSimple specific questions coming through in the chat. I'd love if anyone from LeadSimple could jump in and handle some of those. I don't want to necessarily take up airtime on LeadSimple specific stuff, at least not yet.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that the next piece was, which has come up, is, well, how do you keep, do you live in Gmail or do you live in your shared inbox? You have to, when you go to shared inbox, you're done with Gmail. If you're not going to use Gmail, let me step that back. You're not going to use Gmail to interact with your shared address as well as whatever tool, if you're using like LeadSimple Inbox, whatever. When you decide we're using this tool for our shared inbox, we are only in this tool. Now, the Gmail you keep alive. There are some few small instances where you may need to go back in there. Um, Spam,
correct.
create some rules where you got to go in there and whitelist something. But for the most part, you and one other person should be the only ones that still have access to that and can go in there. Nobody else is living in what I call being a dual agent anymore. You pick one and you ride with it, and that's where we're going.
Yeah.
So that's really important.
Yeah. So to clarify that, so if you set up a shared inbox info@yourcompany.com, so you can just use Gmail, like I was saying earlier. You don't have to use a third-party tool to use the benefits or to gain the benefits of a shared inbox. So you could operate out of that Gmail, multiple users logged in. That's great. But if you decide to use a tool to help you, and we're going to talk about the advantages of these tools, like Help Scout or LeadSimple Inbox, and there's others. Once you make that decision, you do not then keep info@yourcompany.com open in Gmail and like operate out of that anymore. You close that tab, you tell everyone else to close that tab, log out of that account,
Yeah.
and you just use the third party tool. Now, like Wolf was saying, you may need to go back and log in once in a while to do some weird thing. But I see questions all the time from people who are like, why are my emails not being marked as read in Gmail? Doesn't matter. Don't worry about it.
That
Okay. You're
planet
not
got
in
blown
there
up. We don't
anymore.
go there anymore.
We don't go there anymore. We don't talk about Bruno. Okay. So stay out of that. No, it doesn't mean that this is separate from your personal email, right? Obviously, you leave your personal email, peter@rlpmg.com. You leave that up, you operate that like normal. Okay, I think we've kind of beaten this. What's next?
Yeah. So the other part when you're building out your shared inbox, I saw a couple of questions about canned responses and how do we manage them? How do we organize them? Where do we house them? This is a great place, again, policy, setting up policies around canned responses because it's not just a time saver. These are really important documents because they should be in your brand voice. They should be easily accessible, all these different things. So for us, we house them in Notion. It's kind of like a library. Then we put them into our tool, LeadSimple Inbox, and then we can use them from there. Um, it's up to you how many canned responses you want to have. And sometimes it makes sense to have the top 10 canned responses in your shared inbox tool, but then somewhere else where you house your top 300 canned responses because it's a little bit easier to search and navigate and to find something. So it really comes down to policy, but canned responses will help ensure that communications are in brand voice, they are accurate, and they are going to help save time. So making use of canned responses is a great tool and a great thing that you can do with a shared inbox tool. LeadSimple Inbox does have it. Help Scout, the others, I think is a pretty common functionality is canned responses.
I want to give one shout out to an idea that ties in with next month's theme of AI. One more advantage for a shared inbox. If you migrate your external comms into a shared inbox, one advantage there is an AI tool in the future will then have access to all of that communication going back months, potentially years, and is going to be way more effective and sophisticated at helping generate responses or triage or assign. So like the more centralized that communication is for a longer period of time, the more effective an AI agent is going to be able to save you time in the future. So I don't know if I'm explaining that very well, but like the more context you give an AI agent or GPT, the more effective and valuable it's going to be for you. So it is only a matter of time before some large double-digit percentage of incoming external comms are triaged and or actually responded to by AI. And like the quicker, excuse me, the quicker you get on board with a shared inbox, the more powerful that's going to be for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so one question right here, which I think Doug just asked in regards to setting up is, company size and how does that impact the setup? Does it scale, etc.? So the quick and dirty answer is that both of these systems, I think, would scale with any size company. The difference is in that quarterback role. You may need more quarterbacks, or if you're doing one address per team or per department, that kind of breaks that up, but both strategies would work for any size company. And by using, if I go back to the slide here, there we go. Using tags or folders, depending on what service you're using, is a great way to help with the movement of communication and being able to automate based on certain tags. Because if there is some routineness to the communication, that's a great place to interject some automation. So for example, our company, we do brokerage, sales, and then we also do property management. And so one way that we use automation to kind of divide, well, is this a PM email or is this a sales email, is by looking at the sender's domain. So for example, when it comes from an escrow company, I'm 99.9% sure that is not for the PM side, that's for the sales side. So we've built in using Zapier, when emails come into LeadSimple inbox, if they're from certain domains, at Old Republic, at Chicago Title, I put them all in there, ship them, tag them, sales team. And then in our company, we know the sales team is just monitoring any email that is tagged sales team. So by using the domain, we've automated that and got assigned to the right team. That's one simple automation that you can use based on tags. Another one is if you have certain vendors that are only servicing your PM side, you know that the email from that particular vendor's domain is going to go to PM. It doesn't need to go to sales. So there is some automation that you can use to help get communication to the right people. And that can be done also, people are talking about inboxes, not just emails. You got your voicemails and missed calls, you have text messages, those all funnel into this inbox and they all have to be dealt with and they all represent work.
Yep.
So you definitely want to funnel as much of that as possible into the shared inbox so that people can do what they need to do. And using tags is a great way to stay organized and to set up automations so that they are going to get to the right people.
Wolf, do you ever listen to the podcast My First Million?
I think so.
It's
I'm
good.
not a heavy listener, but I do remember that one. Yeah.
So they have a segment of their podcast that they call the Thrill of the Shill. And it's where they promote stuff that they're investors in or that they're, sponsored by or whatever. And I want to introduce that
picture behind you.
Yeah, I want to introduce that segment right now. So there's two things I want to shout out here, and then we're going to jump to Q&A because we've gotten a bunch of great questions from folks that I want to get to. The first is LeadSimple. So we mentioned it's sponsored by LeadSimple. If you're interested in LeadSimple, we're going to drop a link in the chat where you can check out some of their products. They have a CRM built for property managers. They have a process and workflow tool that saves our company at least 1 or 2 full-time employees. That is not an exaggeration. It ties in with our property management accounting software and pulls in all of our properties, our units. Everything is right there. And then they also have a shared inbox product. It's called Inbox. We've been using it for, I think, about a year now. It's very powerful, and it's built to do exactly what we've been talking about. It's built for property managers. So if you're listening to this and you're not a LeadSimple user yet, you can check that out. If you're already a LeadSimple user and you're interested in upgrading to Inbox, which Wolf and I both use, we're going to drop a link there as well where you can chat with someone about potentially upgrading your account and taking advantage of all the stuff we've been talking about. So that's the first shill. The second one I want to shout out is Crane. So if you're not familiar, Wolf and I run a private community for property management professionals. You got to have at least 100 doors under management. But if you like this kind of in-depth, take-home, practical discussion with your peers, and you get a lot out of connecting with other property management professionals, and you want to go deeper, but you're not really finding that you're able to do that over the Facebook groups, that's why we built Crane. So Wolf and I have been running Crane we're coming up on a year. It'll be like late summer. We've got about 65 members in there, and it is thriving. We are loving this. So if you want to get in on that, we're going to drop a link where you can learn more about Crane and what Wolf and I are kind of building in the background there. We don't always talk about it because we don't want to just bore everyone to death, but I did want to mention that on today's webinar. So check that out, and I want to jump to Q&A. So we got a bunch from everything that came in during the webinar registration, and then I've seen a bunch come through, obviously, in the live show today as well. Where do we want to start with this, Wolf?
Yeah, I think these last four bullet points can frame into the Q&A because it's, what do you need to think about? What do you need to plan for ahead of time? And we've already talked about three of these. But the biggest one that I think is important because people get all excited is using keywords and subject lines to create automations that are going to save them time. And I think that's a very dangerous place to be because human nature breaks that. So as you're planning out your inbox, keyword and subject line, using that to automate. Not saying don't do it, but it's fragile, and that's something to think about. The other three we've talked about. So I do see, where was it? Pablo, he says, we use the shared inbox a lot on LeadSimple. We've transitioned back to our personal emails because we feel the assigning is still a bit off. We can only assign emails on our shared inbox to one person at a time. Do you have any email assigning strategies for LeadSimple that might make us go back to using it again? My first question is, multiple people being assigned an email. For me, an email represents work and somebody needs to be accountable for it. And if you have multiple people, who's accountable? Who's going to
So
get it?
I gave my quote around this already. I have another one that I like to go to a lot, which is the fastest way to starve a dog is to make two people responsible for feeding him.
I think I need
So,
a picture for that one. That'd be good.
okay. Let me jump to some of these others that came in prior to the show. Should I create shared email addresses if right now all we use is personal email addresses? The answer is yes. That's what we've been talking about all hour long. So yeah, set up a new shared inbox, whether that's invoices at yourcompany.com, help me at yourcompany.com, info at yourcompany.com. Go into like your back end of your, whether it's Google or Microsoft or whatever your email setup is, and create a new user. It's kind of weird because it wants you to create, like you have to pretend that you're adding a team member basically, and it wants like their first name and everything, but it's actually you're setting up, just all you care about is the email out of there. And yes, unfortunately, you do have to pay for an extra user, at least with Google, to set this up, and it's like $9 a month or whatever it is. But
It's an investment.
trust me, it's worth it.
Yeah.
So let's see. Rules and coaching around this. Our team loves a shared inbox. I offered to stop using it as I thought they didn't like it, but it turns out they love it more than me. Okay, that's more of a comment than a question, but that resonates with my experience as well, is that once you get the team used to this, you get them on board, you get this kind of fully rolled out, they like it. They like the ability to assign things to the right person without forwarding it. They like the ability to go on vacation and know that everything's getting looked at. They like the ability to, when a client calls in with a question, they can see all the prior correspondence around that issue in one place, and they don't have to dig through 15 different email accounts to just get a complete picture. So that resonates with me.
And that's an easy way when your owners push back, because owners feel like, well, I'm an owner, I should have access to the broker or whomever. I want their private cell phone. I want your personal email address. And you have to get used to saying, look, it's info at, because people think, well, I'm getting info at, it's going off to Never Never Land. Nobody's going to see it. And so what I tell owners is like, look, if you email me, that's great. I'll probably get to it in 5 days and I may forget about it because I'm busy doing all this stuff. But if you want an immediate answer, the info at, we have multiple eyes watching this multiple times a day, and you're going to get the best response. So that is what you need to, Clarissa, that's funny. There are different ways to help transition, but letting people know that multiple eyes watch this box all the time is one of the best ways to let owners know that their emergency is going to get addressed quickly because it's in here, opposed to emailing me, the owner of the company, and who knows when I'll get to it.
Yeah. We've had a couple questions come through about the changes with Google. So this actually, I'm immersed in this world because of my email newsletter.
Me too.
Google made some changes recently that affect anyone who sends email in any kind of a mass way. And so any software that interfaces with email in any capacity is being affected by this, including LeadSimple. It really has nothing to do with LeadSimple. It's all about Google and your domain and your Google settings and everything else. So they've got some great support articles on this, but it really affects anyone who's sending email. You got to do some DMARC setup on your domain. I don't know all the specific details of it, but just be aware that Google has made some changes effective as of May 1st that are affecting folks. So dig into that and make sure that you're set up to be compliant.
Yeah, so
Um,
if you're noticing all your clients have Yahoo email addresses that your messages are getting blocked, basically Gmail and Yahoo are in a pissing contest to see who can be the best anti-spam email provider, and they've ratcheted up basically it's a handshake. They've ratcheted up the quality of the handshake needed to know that that handshake really is from Wolf.
yeah. So Susan just popped a great question in chat. I want to get your take on this, Wolf. She said, how do you sign off at the end of the emails? Right? So normally you're sending from peter@rlpmg.com. It's got my email signature at the bottom. But if I'm sending from info@rlpmg.com, what should be at the bottom of that email? What do you think about this?
So in LeadSimple Inbox, that's the tool that we use. You have the ability to set up your own email signature. And if you want to put an artsy fartsy picture, you want to put links, you want to do whatever you want, you can do that. And so when you send emails from that address, it's going to bring in your email signature. So when I send it, it's going to say Wolf, DRE number, all those legal mumbo jumbos. But when a team member sends it, it's going to have their name. So that way, each team member can have their own signature. So even though it's coming from info at, it's going to show that I'm the one that sent that, both on the back end and the front end with that signature. Now, a hack, if you want certain emails in your workflow to come from Susan, but Joe's sending it because Joe is the assistant and all that, just hard code the signature into that email and don't use the placeholder of, the team member signature tag. Just hard code it in there. And then that way that email will come from Susan, even though Joe sent it. So there's a different couple different ways you can do it, but then they only want to talk to you again. So I think the question is, people want access to the decision maker, and how do we set up gatekeepers? We could have a whole separate webinar on that. You just gotta be bold and just say, this is our company policy, this is what we're doing. And those owners that still insist, I don't know if this is the right answer, you ignore. And then they call, they email, they're all upset, and you say, look, this is our service level agreement. If you want a response within 12 business hours, you have to email this address. That agreement does not apply when you email Susan that. And it's going to be a little rough and gruff and salty, but that's the way that you change behavior for those people that resist.
Yeah, I like when you're sending from a shared email inbox, I like having just a sign off be like the RL property management maintenance team or the RL property management customer service team. I go back and forth. I know people do like corresponding with an actual person, and like if you've used a vendor for a long time, for example, you do get to know like their support people, and you kind of there's the ones you like and the ones you don't like and stuff. So I can kind of see it going both ways. This is something you can probably experiment with.
It goes back to creating those policies. What's the company policy?
Yeah. I will throw in a little tidbit here that's more generic in dealing with customers over email, whether it's a shared inbox or not. I have a loose 1 email per day rule. And that means if you are a client or a resident of ours and you email us, we will email you back, and we try to do that within a couple hours, same day. If you then instantly reply and have a whole bunch of other questions, that one's going to wait until the next business day. Now, there's exceptions here, of course, but as a general rule, I don't like to encourage rapid back and forth communication over email. And this gets back to pick up the phone, right?
Yeah.
But this is not a chat window, right? This is email. So if you have a question, I'm trying to force people to like get their whole thought out, and so that we can use email in the way it's intended, not as a chat function. And the other thing is, I don't want 1 or 2 clients or residents consuming my team's time and attention for a whole day. That's just not appropriate. We have all kinds of people that we need to deal with their problems, not just this one person who's demanding answers today. So that's my 1 email per day rule. You can use that if you want. What else we
Peter,
got in the
you,
Q&A?
you just hired a new BDM.
Uh-huh.
I think Michael's question be
Everything goes out the window with sales. Everything goes out the window with sales. So if you are a salesperson who is trying to um, lease a property or sign on a new owner client, ignore everything I just said. Not applicable.
okay. But in regards to, does your BDM do info at RL Property Management, or do they do that on personal? How do you set that up?
They use their personal.
And why
Yeah.
did you go that route?
I want every edge I can get in sales, and I think people like the idea of dealing with an individual that they can form a relationship with during the sales process.
Absolutely. I see one question about holidays and weekends. Yeah, set up autoresponders and let them know that you're not there. Um, you can make it fun, you can make it strict, whatever you want to do. Definitely want to set those up. You can use canned responses. AI can create them. Lots of different ways to make that interesting.
Wolf, what's your opinion on do not reply emails? So when I send an email out through my property accounting software, let's say I email all residents or all owners with an announcement or notification, I have the option to set up so that that goes out from a do not reply email address, or I have the option to set that up so they have the ability to reply. What's your take on this?
So we used to have it come from a do not reply, but then I realized when we started working with LeadSimple that there's a cool thing that we could do. So if I make it come from info at, guess what gets tracked automatically inside of LeadSimple? So when that owner says, "Oh, I never got told about this," that's interesting. I pull up the record and say, "Not only did you get it, you opened it at 6:02 p.m. and then you opened it up the next day. So nice try." So
Yeah,
we have changed ours to in Appfolio our the reply to email address. And what's cool is when it sends out statements every month, that email gets logged into LeadSimple. So when I open up the owner's record, I can see, yep, they got their statements or,
nice.
all that stuff. But we try to send the bulk of our emails actually through LeadSimple. The few exceptions would be the company newsletter that we send to owners that goes through Beehive. Thank you, Peter. And then when we have an emergency type, we got to email lots of people. We do that through Appfolio on our multi-unit properties because they just have that email text all functionality, and that's really nice. But we try to centralize communication and log it to the record so that I can log in. I just had a property manager was on vacation. I covered for her. I can log in and I can see the discussion. And I had no idea what was going on. I'm on the phone with the owner and I can kind of get the gist of it, and we're good to go.
Awesome. We're over the hour.
Hmm.
I'm up for sticking around and answering some more Q&A, but I did want to thank everybody for coming out and participating in the webinar. I hope this was of value. Thank you again to LeadSimple for sponsoring. And I think we can hang out for another 15 minutes or so and tackle some more of these Q&As for anyone who wants to hang out for that. But I did want to just say thanks, everybody. I know a lot of people probably have to jump because we're on the hour.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And we'll see everybody on June 13th. Some AI updates.
So Gina Hill had asked a question, auto assigning based on keywords.
Hmm.
So I like this idea. Is this something that can be done with Zapier right now with LeadSimple Inbox, or is
It
this like
can.
a okay?
It can. But the danger is that keyword is in an email, but the context of the email changed because we're reusing a previous thread. Where keywords will work 100% of the time is from an autoresponder that the person, they fill out a form, there's an autoresponder. You can use wording in that autoresponder to do magic. But if you're looking at keywords from emails that you just want to, hey, anytime an email has the word backed up sewer, assign it to maintenance. Well, what if somebody uses an old email and they have a question about their statement, or they want to know why they got charged a late fee, but we still have backed up sewer in there? That's where things will break.
Okay.
Stephanie, yes, the rest of the Q&A, as long as we're in this Zoom, it will be in the recording.
Yep. Chris had a good question here. How would you name the emails for each pod? I think that's a great question. So, yeah, I mean, do you do like pod A, pod B, pod C, and it's like pod A at rlpmg.com, or do you like name it for the pod leader. What do you think about this, Wolf? I've never run on a pod, so I
Sure.
don't know that I have a great answer here.
So I've helped a couple of companies that I coach set this up, and basically, what's the name of that pod? And we don't want to use the pod lead's name because they're going to change eventually. You might get a new one, so then you got to recreate a new email address. You don't want to pod name it like pod A, pod B, pod C, because how does pod C feel? They're inferior because they're not A. They're
Oh my
like
goodness.
pod one, pod two, pod three. So using colors, using gemstones, you could use superhero names. You can have fun with this. I think people would like a little bit of humor in that, but
I was gonna go with like good, better, best. Do you think that would be
class A,
good,
class B, class C
better,
property.
best? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think just have some fun with it. I would make it be in tune with your company brand, your culture. Um, yeah, I don't think there's a right or wrong, but I do know if you do pod A, pod B, pod C, or something like that, where it seems ranked, owners and tenants are gonna feel different.
Yeah, the other thing is you can customize in any email software, you're typically able to customize like the name that shows up in the from, right? So like you could set up like, you know, silver, gold, bronze, all the different colors, blue, green, orange pods. And then so it would be like orange@rlpmg.com, but you could have the pod name, like the name for that email, that shared inbox email, be the pod leader's name. And then you could just use that. And then if that pod leader ever like leaves or whatever, then you
Mhm.
change it to the new pod leader's name, but it's the same email address, if that makes sense. I think that
Yeah,
could be a nice way to handle it.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so Doug asks, hopefully he's still here. He gave us some nice compliments and then said, "What size are you guys? My curiosity is, does this system work for a 5-person company versus a 15 versus a 50-person company? At what scale is it optimal to use a shared inbox strategy?" You know, the bigger you get, the more you're going to need this, basically. And I think by the time you get to 2 or 3 team members, you're already going to start feeling the pain of some of the things we've been talking about. So I would suggest setting up a shared inbox almost right away and just having your team members operate out of that for external communications and you operate out of that for external communications. Even when you're just starting out and it's just you, it's not a bad idea because you don't really want tenants and owners to associate you and your email with the company in perpetuity.
Hmm.
It can be an advantage when you're early and starting out, but very quickly, if you have any kind of growth at all, you're going to want to disassociate yourself personally from some of that just day to day external comms. And so a shared inbox is a great way to do that.
Yeah, 100% agree. And as you get bigger, you actually now have the potential, just like if you go into a large corporation and they have somebody at the front desk who's a receptionist, that's actually a role that you could have as like communications quarterback or whatever, right? And so like the response time is going to be phenomenal, and they're getting things out, and you could have a lot of fun with it. But either any way you set up your shared inbox will scale. Where
Yep.
things get off the rail is not having policies, and the more hands you have in the pot without policy, things get messy.
What else do you want to tackle?
Let's see, Spencer, what about maintenance coordination through something like Property Mail? Do you have one login, shared email, and watch a shared inbox for those tickets? Do you only operate out of the maintenance coordination software? So, Peter's been using Property Mail for a while. I am on month 3 of Property Mail, and we do not share username and passwords for logins. I know it's a great way to save on software costs, although Property Mail doesn't bill that way. Some do. The problem is you don't know who did what. If everybody's logging in with info at, who screwed up? So always have individual username and passwords. I talk about how we do that, even though people don't have quote unquote individual emails, but have that. Our maintenance coordinator is operating most of his time inside of Property Meld and using the different filtered um, watch list, whatever they call it, to figure out what he's done. And we've color coded ours. So if it has the red flag, that number should always be 0. If it's yellow, we've set up rules. And if it's green, it's okay to have numbers there. But monitoring that and using that to deal with the maintenance.
Yeah, you want to push your residents to submit everything through Property Meld if you're using Property Meld, and try and avoid using email to communicate with residents or even vendors to handle maintenance. You want to do all that communication through Meld specifically if it has to do with a specific maintenance request.
All right, how about this one? I think this one will be good for you. What if a company has portfolios and team leader leading couple of portfolio and supports separate leasing department and account? So I think it's you have somebody that's wears multiple hats, I think is the question here, and how do they know where to go? How do you deal with that?
Well, yeah, portfolio style. So in that scenario, you have property managers who do everything, and they have a specific number of accounts. So they have the Northeast region or whatever, and they're doing everything. They're doing rent collection, they're doing maintenance coordination, they're overseeing turns, they're overseeing rent, all the lease renewals and all that. So in that scenario, a shared inbox makes a little less sense. But you're also really highlighting the weakness of the portfolio style, where you're really reliant on that one person to not only be a jack of all trades, but they really own the relationships there. And if they leave or they're out sick or on vacation, you're kind of stuck. And that's why I don't love portfolio style in general. And I don't know that a shared inbox is going to help you too much there. The way I guess I would see that being used is you would have to just have a single shared inbox for the whole company, and then you'd have to have someone assigning the conversations in there to the different portfolio, to the property managers, basically. So someone would be in charge of quarterbacking that shared inbox, because there'll be a lot of communication going on in there, and that person will have to know every property and which property manager it belongs to, and just assign those, constantly be in there assigning them. And then the property manager will operate out of that shared inbox to do everything that they need to do. That's how I would envision it.
Yeah, that's a good one. Can you change outgoing / reply me email addresses in AppFolio for shared email, multiple users, same email address? So, yeah, on a per user level in AppFolio, you can adjust the reply to email address. And so for us, every user in AppFolio has changed theirs to info at our shared inbox. And so the only stuff that's getting sent out of AppFolio at this moment, statements, and reports. That's it. We don't do any communication with tenants or owners inside of AppFolio. It's all done with inside of LeadSimple. We text them through LeadSimple, we call them through LeadSimple, and we email them through LeadSimple.
Got it. We had a question come through: how to solve one person taking the majority of the work. So yeah, this gets back to some of the policy stuff that Wolf was talking about halfway through the webinar, where you want to have one person quarterbacking the shared inbox and distributing the emails appropriately. So that person would need to kind of load balance and make sure they're not overloading any one person. And then on the flip side, if you have someone going in there and just picking off all the easy ones, and so it looks like their volume of like tickets closed or conversations closed is really high, but that's because they're just taking all the easy ones. That's another thing you need to watch for. And then they're leaving all the hard, tricky ones for somebody else, and that person's way overloaded. So this is kind of your job as the manager, right? As the department head, or as the manager, or as the business owner, this is your job, is to load balance, or just watch and assess and communicate with your team members to make sure that no one person is getting overloaded and that another person's slacking off. So the shared inbox tools will typically allow you to see some great metrics around response time and number of conversations closed, like by employee or by shared inbox. And so you can take a look at that and also chat with the individual team members and make policy changes that you need to make in order to enforce a more fair arrangement. The quote that's really relevant here is you can't solve a social problem with technology. You can't solve a performance issue with a piece of tech or an automation. So if you have an issue with a team member, don't try and get clever with like rules in the software. You just need to go speak to that person and have a really candid conversation with them.
Yeah, and going back to one of the words that you dropped in there was, they're closing out all the easy ones. One of the policies you want to come up with is, what does closed mean? Does it mean I
Yeah,
read it, I close it, and then I'm going to do the work,
that's a
or
great one.
the work is done, now I close it? Because when you start doing a shared inbox, naturally one of the things that you're going to want to look at is our response time. How quickly are responding? So now that becomes gamified, and people are like, oh, I'm just going to quickly mark these closed, and then on a separate piece of paper, I'm going to write the things I need to do. And most of the time they get done, sometimes they don't. So one nuanced change that LeadSimple just did to theirs is they got rid of closed, and it's now called resolved. And to me, that's a one word change, but it means a lot, that I'm not going to mark this done until it's been resolved. And so I think having a policy around what is closed or resolved, what does that mean, so that you don't get people just marking, oh yeah, done, 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 and it's closed, but the work hasn't been done. Because that's so important. That message, whether it's a text, a phone call, or an email, represents work to be done, not just an email.
Yeah. So there's a concept called paired metrics that I really like, and I forget who first brought this to my attention. But the concept is that whenever you gamify something or you tie a metric to it or you start measuring it and it starts to affect people's, you know, job performance, anytime you do that, it starts to become gamified and it starts to become messed with and manipulated. And so just like Wolf was saying, if you're benchmarking folks on response time, guess what's going to happen? They're going to start responding really damn fast. Now, what's the quality of those responses? What's the thoughtfulness of those responses? What's the rate of typos in those responses? So the way that you want to do this is every time you roll out a new metric, you want to think about pairing it with another metric.
Mm-hmm.
And the appropriate metric, I think, to pair it with here would be something like an NPS score or a CSAT, customer satisfaction score. And there's all kinds of software you can use to measure these things, and that you can even tie them right in with your emails. And you've probably seen this where at the bottom of the email, it's like, how did you enjoy this interaction with me? Click the happy face or the sad face, or click 1 through 10 or whatever. And so using a paired metric like that can help combat some of the gamification that will come if you start to benchmark your team members on something like response time. So consider that as you start to roll out like a shared inbox strategy.
Yeah.
And getting back to what you're saying, Wolf, about like resolved versus closed, the way I think about this is way back before we used any third-party software and we were just in a shared Gmail account. The way that I enforced this was that anything in the inbox was not yet resolved. Anything that was unread, that meant it hadn't been touched yet. And there was
Mm-hmm.
no one's done anything. So if you click on an email and it becomes read, you now have to do something with that. You can't just click on it and then do nothing. So if you click on it, you then have to like respond or forward or whatever needs to happen, start it in motion. If it's done, and that can be as simple as just hitting reply and answering the question, you archive it and it's now out of the inbox. So when I log into any of our shared inboxes back in the day, not now, but back in the day, the inbox represented everything that was still an open ticket, so to speak, and anything that was unread, I knew it hadn't been touched yet. And so that was like a really quick at a glance way to understand where's the team loading at. If there's a whole bunch of unread messages in there going back to 3 p.m. yesterday, ooh, we got a problem. I need to figure out what's going on here. On the other hand, if there's 2 messages, they're both read, and I can see that we're just waiting for a response or something, then everything's looking pretty good. And you can take that same way of thinking into these shared inbox tools like LeadSimple Inbox, and I'm sure Help Scout has something similar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, there's I mean, you can go back to what's his name, David Allen, GTD, getting things done, and his
Yeah.
framework around actual paper. He updated it around email, but basically for our company, you touch it, you own it. And so if you're going to open that email, you now own it. So you either need to get it to the right spot, you need to delete it, or you need to do it.
Or
And
you
so,
need to learn how to market on red.
yeah,
I've
yeah,
done that a few times back in the day. It's like, ooh, I don't know. I don't want. I didn't mean to touch that.
undo,
Let me
undo.
mark that on red.
Yeah.
All right. So here's a LeadSimple specific question that came through. How can I integrate my own email into LeadSimple? I'd like to be able to only show emails from my LeadSimple contacts to show up in my own LeadSimple inbox.
Mm. So inside a Lead Simple inbox, there's shared, and then there's I think they call it individual because when people heard the word personal, they were thinking that it was their, hotdaddy64 at hotmail.com email address. So it's your individual
How'd you
and your
how'd you know my personal email?
yeah. So one thing that I recommend, just me personally, so as a company owner, I still have Wolf at, and I use it individually because I'm doing all kinds of things and all that. But separating those two, and you can have both an individual and the shared. And on the shared, you can then control in Lead Simple who has the ability to see it and use that email address, and also setting that email address as the default for specific processes. So you could have, in your case, Peter, you have a maintenance email address. So all the maintenance processes, the default address is maintenance at RL property management, sales at whatever. You can do that. And then when you want to just send a one-off email, it's not part of a process. When you click new in the from line, you can click it and then you'll be able to select which email address you want this email to come from. And what's cool is those emails, they're not actually sent from Lead Simple, and it's like cloaking your email address. It's sent through the Gmail system or Outlook or whatever. It's actually going through there. Don't ask me how that works, but it's actually sent through those servers.
Yeah. Okay. I'm taking a look at our last few Q&As here. Yeah, Doug had a follow up. He said, I started using shared inbox at 3 employees up to 11 and made some shifts to the inbox along the way. I'm a huge fan of shared inbox and using it, but I'm starting to feel some downsides due to the volume of inquiries coming to group inboxes. We increased the number of groups, which has helped, but I'm curious if this is still going to work at a larger business size. Yeah, I mean, I don't see how reducing the number or getting rid of shared inboxes would help here. You're still going to have the same volume coming in. So it's
Reduce
it
that volume.
yeah, it's really back to the first few slides that Wolf was showing about reducing the overall volume of incoming email. And you may need to do an audit. You may need to go through a week of emails, and you don't have to do this personally. You can have someone do this, but go through a week of the incoming emails across the whole company, all the shared inboxes, and any other like external comms, and classify it. Have someone classify it. First, was this from resident, tenant, vendor, or other? I'm sorry, resident, owner, vendor, or other. And then what was the nature of it? Was it a question? Was it a complaint? Was it a request for information? Was it a rental application? Was it a, so you could break this down and start to understand like what is generating these emails? Who are they coming from? What are they asking? And then you want to go back and modify your processes to head off those questions before they come in. So this is going to be everything from your rental application process to the Q&A on your website to what's in your rental owner statement that goes out, like every different piece and part of your external comms. And there's more than you think. You'd be amazed at all the communication that goes out to residents and owners that you don't have direct eyesight on that is happening and has big opportunities to improve, and just start to chip away at that stuff.
So we did that, and that's where we didn't necessarily come up with the concept, but implemented a concept of the tenant university. So in our tenant onboarding and now our owner onboarding, at a certain part, a new process starts, and it's the tenant university and the owner university. It lasts about 14 to 21 days. and it drips out answers to those questions that we were getting during those first 30 days of either a new owner or a new tenant, because we realized they're all asking the same stuff. So let's make little videos and we'll drip it out. And that cut down those first 30-day emails drastically because we were anticipating what they were going to ask and gave it to them ahead of time.
Yeah. Love it. Well, we're coming up on 90 minutes. I got to jump, get ready for my next meeting. This was awesome. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Thank you, Wolf, for preparing
Yeah.
those awesome slides and bringing the knowledge.
Awesome. Everybody have a good one. We'll see you on June 13th when we do some AI.
All right. Bye, everybody.